Well, greetings once again, my fellow horror fanatics. I gotta warn you, this is gonna be a pretty dull video. No reviews, no unboxings. Instead, this is gonna be a retrospective analysis because it's Pride Month. So I felt this topic was pretty relevant because if there is any one stereotype and utterly absurd misconception I have seen of gay and trans citizens here in the United States, it is the image of them as predatory. And I think there is really no more clear and more prominent an example of that in pop culture than Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And it's a movie I actually love to this day, but it's just a pity that so many people misinterpret it that way. Because the fact matter is, Buffalo Bill isn't transsexual and is not gay at all, which is clearly outlined in the film and in the book, which is what we're going to be discussing here today. So, buckle your safety belts, folks. We're about to get a little deep.
To start with the perspective of Ted Levine, who played Buffalo Bill, he has stated in numerous interviews that he never regarded the character as a gay stereotype, and that in point of fact, in all his research and soul-searching, he came to see it as the exact opposite. And more than once in the set, director John Demme raised this concern, only for Levi to inform him that, well, this character is not gay. If he was gay, then he'd be killing men. But instead he kills women, which really does speak a lot to where Buffalo Bill's true intentions lay.
And in point of fact, for his research for the character, Levine actually did in fact go to some real gay bars and watch female impersonation performances. Men who, maybe they were gay, maybe they weren't, but they just enjoyed dressing in gaudy outfits and lip-syncing to popular music at the time. And there was one that he interviewed that made a very vivid impression on him, who he asked, "So why do you do this? What's the appeal?" This individual told him, I believe his exact words were, "As a woman, I'm a sensation. As a man, I'm just a punk from Puerto Rico." From that, Levine drew a lot of inspiration. And he thought, well, Buffalo Bill isn't trying to become a woman for sexual reasons. It's because he thinks that as a woman, he will have a power and a confidence that he otherwise lacks. Which actually leads into the next bit of this discussion.
In the film, our first clue to the identity of Buffalo Bill is when Clarice Starling discovers this severed head in a jar that Lecter identifies as a former patient of his, Benjamin Raspel, who Starling mistakes as having been a transvestite due to his makeup. Lecter corrects her that Raspel was simply a manic depressive, but this is actually a departure from the book where things are a bit more fleshed out.
Because in the actual book, it's not Raspel's head in the jar. And Lecter explains this to Starling. It's the head of another man named Claus, who was yet another of Raspel's lovers. This is important later in the book, and unfortunately was omitted from the film, because Lecter was actually the one who killed Raspel, and he reminisces on his last session when he killed him, and there is a direct quote of Raspel saying that James Gum, Buffalo Bill's real name, isn't gay, and that's why their relationship didn't work. And he also goes on to describe how Buffalo Bill began getting the inspiration to create a woman's suit out of women after being dumped by Raspel for Claus. He was at his lowest and stole a suitcase, which happened to contain cocoons intended for a bug collector. And he opened it and rifled through it and found one that had a butterfly hatching out of its cocoon. And he watched it pull itself out of the cocoon, flutter off, and then he knew what to do, and that's when he murdered Claus. So Buffalo Bill is quite explicitly laid out here as not being gay, just as self-loathing and wanting to change. That plays into the next part of this very pivotal scene as Lecter starts to suggest how Buffalo Bill can be caught.
If you recall, Lecter proposes that the best way to find Buffalo Bill will be to approach clinics that perform sex change surgery and request a list of applicants they have denied due to failing a background check and psychological examination.
See, much like the image of gay or trans people as predatory, there's also a lot of misconceptions about what goes into a sex change operation. It's not like normal cosmetic surgery, like lip implants or a breast implant, where basically you tell the surgeon you want it, you tear off a check, and you schedule a surgery date. For actual sex change operations, there really is a vetting process. They really do put an applicant through a psychological evaluation to determine if they are really, in fact, transsexual. And the majority of applicants get rejected, at least at the time that this film was made. It could have changed since then. I'm not very up on that kind of research. But I saw a lot of misconceptions about this over the last several years, as states have begun to ban conversion therapy, which, by the way, I am also personally opposed to, and I'm glad to see it getting banned. Right here in my home state of New Jersey, when the former governor signed a bill to ban conversion therapy, I actually, on a message board, saw some moron talk about how, well, what if a person changes their gender because of a therapist and then changes their mind? And I just groaned and rolled my eyes, because that's the popular misconception. They think it's such a simple thing. It is not. And it's totally underwritten, the kind of struggle that a transsexual person goes through in coming to grasp that part of themselves. Which leads to our next part.
Because Starling initially rejects Lecter's suggestion, pointing out that there is no known correlation between transsexualism and violence. Lecter actually affirms this and informs her that is why Buffalo Bill would be rejected, because his psychological results would come back reflecting a person with violent tendencies. And in a scene from the book that was actually filmed but ultimately left out and can be found on special edition DVDs or even here on YouTube, the FBI does approach a sex change clinic, who initially refused to cough up any patient list, but then one surgeon does admit to remembering a patient who reacted to his rejection by confronting him in a parking lot and shoving him to the ground. That's Buffalo Bill.
And this is really a pivotal piece of information in the film. And in fact, it is a real fact that often gets overlooked by just ignorant people in this image of gays and transsexuals as predatory. Starling notes to Lecter that there is no connection between transsexualism and violence, and that if anything, what studies have been done indicate transsexuals tend toward passivity. They have enough struggle coming to grips with that side of themselves. They don't want to broadcast it. I think that should go without saying. And Lecter, in fact, tells her that she's correct. And that's why they're going to ask for a list of applicants rejected for sex change surgery. This is another important fact that I think gets glossed over a lot in pop culture. For a person to apply for sex change surgery, they do have to undergo a psychological evaluation to determine if they really are a transsexual. And on that basis, so many applicants get rejected. They may be depressed, they may be frustrated, they may be uncertain and question themselves, but that does not a transsexual make. A real transsexual is a person with legit problems, serious ailment that requires surgery to correct, as well as chemical therapy. And in fact, there's a little note in the book about Buffalo Bill treating himself with hormones that he has to get through the black market. So in point of fact, this is the key piece of information to tell us Buffalo Bill's not gay. He's not transsexual, and it puts that legit real-life fact right out there that gay people, transsexuals, they're not predators. They're not monsters. And this leads us to our next point.
Yes, the infamous scene of Buffalo Bill dancing in front of the camera. I'm really playing it safe with YouTube here. I don't want them coming after me for anything, I hope you understand. But I want to point out that Ted Levine in interviews has stated that he did not see this as Buffalo Bill behaving in a way that is synonymous with a gay person or a trans person, but rather as Buffalo Bill as a straight and incredibly homophobic and transphobic man doing a very bad imitation of what he thinks a gay or trans person behaves like. Sort of like how many criminologists believe that the Jack the Ripper letters are fakes because they read not like a serial killer wrote them, but someone doing a really bad imitation of what he thinks a serial killer would sound like.
And in point of fact, also in another scene in Buffalo Bill's little underground lair, which takes place toward the end of the film when Starling has found him and is hunting him through the basement, there actually is a blink and you'll miss it moment where she busts a door open and on the wall you can see photographs of Buffalo Bill cavorting about with various women. That scene tends to not get noticed because it is so fast, but also a lot of network television broadcasts of this movie tend to cut that out because, well, yeah, you can see it all.
As we all know, in the end, Buffalo Bill is thwarted by our hero, Clarice, who is an important figure of gender empowerment herself for overcoming her obstacles in the male-dominated FBI. And it's worth noting the one most poignant moment of Buffalo Bill's ending that I wish had made it in the film is his final words being the gasp, "How does it feel to be so beautiful?" The question he was never able to answer for himself.
And I'm going to close this one out with a little question for all of you out there. Now that Netflix has picked up Hannibal, there's renewed talk that maybe it could get a season 4. Personally, I don't think it's worth doing at this stage. The show was canceled how many years ago now? Probably almost 6-7 years. I feel that the actors have gotten older, they don't look the same, and they made it pretty obvious what the ending was in the final episode of the 3rd season, so how do you pick up from there? But there were plans for another season that would have revolved around the hunt for Buffalo Bill, so to all of you out there, feel free to leave down in the comments section, what actor could you have seen for Hannibal as Buffalo Bill that could maybe have lived up to Ted Levine's incredible performance? How he did not get an Oscar nod that year himself is beyond me. Best Supporting Actor should have been in the cards. So thank you for joining me for this look back and this analysis. I hope I didn't spoil anything for you if you wanted to read the book. I encourage you all, as always, take precautions amid this viral outbreak. Wash your hands, keep your distance, wear a mask. Please join me for my next video because I do intend at least one more retrospective analysis for Pride Month. So, as always, folks, eat, drink, and be scary, and support Pride.